It's Toronto's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Pierre Séguin is a dynamic technology leader, innovator, and product manager with almost 2 decades of experience creating, developing, and implementing solutions for customers ranging from the biggest of multinationals to the smallest of children. When I first met Pierre, he was, and he still is, founder of Brili, an application that relieves families of stress by helping kids succeed in their daily routines. With Brilli, parents set up the activities their kids need to do when getting ready for school, after school, or at bedtime. These then come to life as a game on a mobile device. Parents can monitor in real time from their own device while kids stay on task and earn rewards. Brilli builds on the proven practice of using visual schedules to give kids structure and consistency, while making them more fun and easier to use. So let's get on to the interview, Pierre. Tell us a bit more about your background.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to participate. I have had a career of over 20 years now in technology and marketing with a focus on software development. I've worked primarily in professional services, but back when we met, I was very focused on my first ever startup, which is it's called Brilli, and it is a system to help families and kids enjoy and succeed at daily routines. So when my son was about 5 or 6 years old, we were running into a lot of trouble with just getting through a morning routine, for example, getting him off to school on time, because he just seemed to have a lot of trouble with following our instructions and remembering to do things and just not dawdling. And we often end up with these raised voices or meltdowns, and it was actually really stressful. So as part of the process that we followed to try and improve things, we went to talk to experts and we read a lot of books. And the best tools at the time that they were presenting or proposing that we use were, lists to help show kids, what the tasks are that they needed to do, visuals attached to the list, and also using something like an egg timer so that the child would be able to know when their time is up on any given task. And of course, these techniques work, but they're actually hard to put into practice in everyday life for most parents, assuming they even know about them. So being a guy who worked in technology and I was really interested in application design, I thought we could build a better routine guidance tool and actually make it a game for kids so that there would be a visual that shows the tasks that they need to do, whether it's, make your bed, get dressed, brush your teeth. And then each task would have a little timer attached to it. And as the kid completes the activities, any time that they save from the timer gets banked for a reward activity at the end. So they were motivated to get through all of the activities quickly and independently so that they could earn some free time for whatever activity they wanted to. So we designed it and we tested it with a few families, and we found that it worked, and we were testing it at our place. And so we decided to build a business around it, and so that's how Brili came to be.
So why become an entrepreneur? I mean, what made you stop and say, instead of sort of working for someone in a consulting role, what made you stop and say, this time I want to do it on my own?
Well, this was an interesting time for me because I had just come off of sort of an agile transformation within a larger company, and that and for anybody not familiar with software development, agile is it can be pretty new. It's a different way of managing projects, and it's very iterative. And you're not trying to define the entire project up front. You're just sort of doing little bits at a time. And through learning that and learning about how products come together, I wanted to do more of it. I was really excited about building products and working with small teams to make things happen quickly and to innovate And I don't know, I caught the entrepreneurial bug from all of this exposure I got to what the best companies were doing with products. And, the timing was right. So I decided to give it a try.
How did you focus on building that sort of stimulation into a business? Wanting and making things happen are two different things. How did you make it happen?
Well, I think to make it happen, it was a lot of work, but it meant becoming sort of very multidisciplinary, which I guess I've always dabbled in a lot of different things, but I was the guy handling the business, the guy, thinking about the product design, doing the marketing and going out and networking and trying to find a developer to partner with and find the right designer and overseeing that process. So having to, just get my hands dirty and do a lot of hands-on work was important. And then, it wasn't a cheap process either. I was fortunate to have some savings that I was able to dip into, and also some support from family early on that
was going to be my next question is, how did you finance the start of your company?
Yeah, it was hard. It was self-financed initially, and then when that ran out, my father was very helpful as well. And then, but I also along the way partnered with a great developer named Kyle Lee, who was he became my partner for a good long time. At the time we were in the same office space as you, and. That was that we made a huge amount of progress during that time, just working full time on designing the product and responding to customer feedback and getting it out there and getting in front of as many influencers as possible who could help us promote the product or try to connect to further funding. From there, it just kind of snowballed, and we were able to build the product within this. From the time I started working on it full time to the time we launched the product was about 10 months, and then we had I think another couple months, and we were on all platforms. We were on iOS, Android, and the web. So when you really jump into it with both feet and find the right help, you can get something happening pretty quickly. And then, of course, that's. After you've invested all that time and money, the real trick is to try and maintain your traction and become profitable. And that's a whole other story.
When we last chatted a couple of years ago, I guess 18 months ago or whatever, Brilli was still pounding along and making headway, and you were getting some great reviews. So you kind of managed to find a way in the market. But if you can sort of put it into 5 minutes, give me the story of Brilli then, the track, and Brilli now, kind of thing.
Sure thing. So we were very well received by our target market in the sense that we connected with a lot of families through media. Like we were featured on Metro Morning at one point, which was great. We went to the big ADHD organization conferences in the U.S. and Canada, and then we also went to conferences and met with psychiatrists and psychologists who worked with kids and behavior and learning challenges. And when we got feedback about the product from people who were using it, it was absolutely heartwarming. That's really what kept us going when things were difficult. We were receiving really heartfelt notes from moms talking about how they were brought to tears by their child's ability to get through a morning routine just on their own within with a smile, instead of there being a screaming match as there had been like every day up until that point. And that was the typical kind of feedback that we get. And despite having a successful product in the sense that it made a positive impact, it was incredibly difficult to monetize it. Just from a strategic perspective, what I had tried to do was to position the product as a solution and as a software as a service, and not as an app. And I was doing that on purpose because there's a pretty pervasive perception that apps should be free or very, very cheap. And unfortunately, we didn't have, at least initially, or for the short to midterm future, the size of audience that we would have needed to be able to have a very low price point on the app. So we were charging, using a subscription model. Because of that, we were very dependent on successful onboarding and then also on stickiness for the app. And so stickiness wasn't across the board. So a lot of families would stop using it after about a month. And, when I'd reach out and ask why, as for their feedback, they would say, well, the product was great. It worked so well that my son didn't, learned his routines and didn't need it anymore. So, I had mixed feelings about that kind of feedback. On the one hand, I was very happy and gratified that it had worked and that, we had improved the lives of a family. But by the same token, it was negating our ability to make any money from a subscription model. So we, over time, we experimented a lot with different pricing and different subscription models. And what was difficult and, a bit of it was a learning experience for me, was that the cost of all of those iterations, changing the pricing model, doing the work that we needed to gain visibility from an analytics perspective into what people were doing and what their propensity to buy would be, et cetera. There was a very real development cost with those things. And so a lot of time and money was being spent just on tweaking the pricing model, and it never seemed to be working. We never seemed to make that breakthrough from a pricing perspective. And in the meantime, we weren't developing new features or, adding to the product stickiness. And so that was a bit discouraging. And at the same time, we were also discovering from a technology perspective that a lot of times our platform used third parties, for, either a database provider or push notification provider, just so we wouldn't have to build all that stuff ourselves from scratch, which is, typical for a startup to do. Unfortunately, a lot of those services broke. They would break things. Either they would deprecate a version or they would just stop working. And, we would get the angry emails from customers saying that they couldn't run their daily routines or that their kids had missed their notification to start the routine, but it wasn't our fault. In the meantime, we had to dive in for a couple of weeks to, to fix the bugs or to address the issues that had been caused by these third parties. So that was another challenge. And so at the end of, we were actually successful in obtaining funding from the Ontario government for developing an education version and conducting research with it. And that was wonderful. And that kept us going for another little while. Unfortunately, it was a reimbursement-based program, and I just couldn't manage to stay ahead of the time that it took from a cash flow perspective to get to spend the money on salaries and then, wait for the reimbursement. So ultimately I had to cut that short from a development perspective.
I think it's really good because what a lot of the interviews we do is very, very much the runway and how it goes and things like this. But I think what you're showing as an entrepreneur is even with the best of intentions, with a good product, with a good reception, sometimes it's just too tough to break through. So, I think everyone's getting that story, but I think that just so as we kind of conclude the story, maybe just say where Brilli is today, because I think it's a great ending to an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah, for sure. So we got to the point where, and again, it was a problem with a third party service that was about to shut down, and we just couldn't afford to do the upgrade that would have allowed us to continue using using that service. And so I sent an email out to our customers, and by this point we had several thousand people using it. and just said, yeah, sorry, it looks like the the end is approaching. We're going to try and find a solution, but if we can't, we're going to have to shut it down. And it would have been December 18th. But fortunately, several customers reached out with offers of assistance, and in fact, one customer in particular was also a technology entrepreneur, was able to he essentially offered to take over the product and manage it going forward with his technology resources, and actually his nephew, who's a developer, is a partner as well in the business, and so that kind of blossomed into a little family, a family business on his end, based in Germany. And so I've been working with them for the past several months to transition the Brilli platform. During that time, they fixed it, they upgraded it, they ensured its continuity for the foreseeable future. And so the product lives on and continues to help families. It continues to make the days better for a lot of kids, and actually a lot of adults. We've gotten feedback from former military personnel who were suffering from PTSD and needed to have their routines supported by the software. So just a wide variety of people being helped by this, and this was so it's a happy ending in the sense that even though I wasn't able to make it a profitable venture and recuperate my time and money investment, at least yet, it's been handed off to somebody who can take it forward. I still have a role in an advisory capacity, and I still own a percentage of the new company. There's still a chance. I've still got some hope that maybe that investment will be repaid. But if not, I'm just happy to see that the product has lived on and it's working.
All this in mind, I mean, in terms of the Toronto experience, is there something about Toronto that entrepreneurs, like technology entrepreneurs, should know? Because I mean, you're a technology entrepreneur. I mean, and you obviously, live and breathe the Toronto environment. Do you have any kind of advice to people within the Toronto area in terms of building, let's say, your specialty, technology?
Well, Toronto's it's a great environment to be in as an entrepreneur from the perspective of, it's such a hub for smart people who are entrepreneurial, and there are so many interesting things happening, so many interesting products being developed, so much inspiration, and also a pretty good support network in terms of the organizations that are available. I think if there's anything to be cautious about in the Toronto environment, is that it's pretty noisy. It's very difficult to break through, and the startup scene, I guess we could call it, has actually become a bit of an industry where a lot of people out there are trying to make their business that of servicing the startups, and sometimes it's initially it's you can mistake some of these people as investors, and sometimes they're not, right? So you have to sort of think, have a clear understanding of what everybody's motivations are and what each person is trying to get out of the relationship. And I find that just because Toronto is so, the bright side, vibrant as a startup community, the startup scene actually has a lot of noise in it too that you can detract your focus.
So let's move off that. Give us the top 3 things on your inspired life list, because I know you're kind of an inspired kind of guy. I mean, what are those top 3 things that inspires Pierre?
I really like solving problems, and I like. I'm a tech nerd to my core. I'm not a programmer, but I dabble a lot with code myself, just on interesting hobby projects. So I just like to hear what's going on, and there are just such great inventions and ideas out there that just make me think, well, if you could do that, maybe you could do this, and I get excited about the possibility of designing something that works and building it and getting it out there. To me, that's great.
So I know you listened to another podcast, but I don't know whether you went as far as this question. So there's a small tropical island just off Fiji that only has one phone booth and no internet. So we drop you off there. You don't have a computer or a smartphone or tablet. You can use the phone booth located there anytime to call the boat, and we'll come back and pick you up. How long would you last before you made the call, and what would you do while you were there?
This island has the necessary food and shelter and the basics of survival there, or is that something I have to
just imagine? It's an abundant tropical island.
Okay. That's an interesting.
It doesn't have casinos though, so that no.
I would probably stay long enough to explore, to get to experience it. I don't think I'd be able to stand still for very long. I would, even when I vacation someplace, I have to be out and about doing something. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I would say I probably wouldn't last much beyond a week. I think, assuming I can explore everything in that week and just kind of experience it, that would be it. I think for me, then I'd have to ask for to be airlifted or shipped out of there.
Well, yeah, I think the interview's been great in the sense you've showed a lot of people some of the good and the bad and a bit of ugly about entrepreneurship. And some people may want to get a hold of you. How can people get a hold of you? Is there anything you'd like to add that I've missed out?
One thing I'd like to add, especially as far as your earlier question about inspiration, mm-hmm. is that my wife and son have been immensely inspiring to me. My son for obvious reasons, in that he was he kind of gave me the reason to do the product, but also because along the way he was always giving me great input, just really being supportive for his old man, and of course my wife went through probably as much of the difficult times as I did, just sort of propping me up and
you gotta have a good wife beside you or a good husband beside you.
Exactly. Yeah. So sure. Yeah, exactly. So I'm happy to share anything that people might think of value is in terms of my experience with the startup scene and the startup itself. And so I could be emailed at pierre@brilli.co, Brilli.co.
Pierre, it's been great talking to you, and thank you, everybody. I hope it was a very interesting experience listening to Pierre.